Hi. I saw a Russian video by geologist scientist Alexander Koltsepin on YouTube and decided to show some of the pictures and explain them in English just because they are interesting. This is not the first evidence of extremely ancient human civilization. Thousands of such archaeological artifacts are collected in Forbidden Archaeology by Michael Kreml, Unknown History of Mankind by Richard Thompson, and the works of Graham Hancock and Klaus Donner. So, despite the numerous well-studied and well-documented historic artifacts, the history books in school have not been updated with those discoveries. And in reality, people are usually unaware of the ancient and glorious history of their own species, of the humankind. This video is just a small reminder to attract your attention, to remind you that you will not know who you are unless you start this exploration yourself. You need to educate yourself on the actual history of the human species. And I think this is rather important because, I mean, it's kind of interesting to know who you are, and you cannot know who are you as a human if you don't know anything about the ancient history of your own kind. And by the way, within ancient history you will find also amazing clues about the magical abilities you have as a human. So enough of introduction, so it was a bit too long. Now let's go to the actual photos. There were dozens of them. I just selected some of the more interesting ones. This is not some modern construction site, but these are metal pieces sticking out of a solid basalt rock. It's not that holes have been made in the rock and they were inserted later on. No, when this basalt stone was formed, God knows how many millions of years ago, it just formed around them. They were already present before that. And in this particular area in Israel, actually there are no functioning volcanoes anywhere in the nearby area. So obviously we are having an artifact from probably a few millions of years ago. Nearby on the same site we see another piece of some sort of man-made metal rope or something like that. The instrument showing it is a recent one. What the scientist is showing is only the rusty metal rope, which is also embraced by this basalt rock at the time when the rock was getting formed. Again, there are no volcanoes nearby, so this must have happened really, really long time ago. The scientist Alexander Koltsepin, who took these photos, is actually, his specialty is geology, and he inspected the local area, and due to the lack of volcanoes, at least 1.5 to 2 million years must have elapsed after this basalt rock was formed. And this is the actual archaeological site in Israel where these finds have been made. We can see very ancient, huge rocks which form the bases. They are heavily worn out by the erosion. And on the top of that, we see again some sort of megalithic, however much more recent structure. The next photo is from Turkey. Again, we see very ancient megalithic structure carved into a huge rock. Just to pay attention to the kind of erosion it has suffered. I mean, it's absolutely impossible to have such an erosion within 5 or 10,000 years. It's a really much longer period. We can even talk about millions of years in this case. In other words, it's such a long period we can't even say how long it is. And now this is from the famous site of Cappadocia in Turkey. On the very top layers, you can see just ordinary eroded mountain slope. There are no human-made formations over there. The rocks on the topmost layers that has no remains dates at minimum 4 million thousand years. Excuse me, there is no thousand, it's only 4 million. More than enough, no need of thousands. I'm just listening to a video in a foreign language and putting it in another foreign language, so sometimes my tongue slips. Sorry about that. So the layers that are below that, the kind of pink rock, they are dated by the Turkish archaeologists and geologists at minimum 12 million years. And in that layer you can see like small dots. You will see them much better on some of the next photos. Those are entrances to kind of underground structures, obviously man-made structures. And this is not something that has been carved later on after the rocks have been laid bare by the erosion. No, from the erosion signs we can see that some parts, mostly originally these structures were made before they were covered with these top layers, which are already millions of years old. And in some cases we can see modern additions, let's say by the Christians or something like that. But again, that is done on the top of something that has already been heavily eroded. Here in the kind of pinkish stone, you can still see parts of this very ancient structures still partially buried. If you dig, you will excavate the full door, so to say. So this is not some modern addition that has, by modern I mean only a few thousand years old, that has been added nowadays after the rocks have surfaced again. Here again we can see how the dark colored basalt rocks simply formed over already existing structure that was already eroded by the times the basalt was being formed, and this basalt was formed quite a few million years ago. Here it almost looks like as if there has been a very old, heavily eroded row of statues on the right. Maybe that's a lady with some sort of helmet, and who knows, maybe that's what it was. So this is what you can see inside those structures when you enter the small doors that we showed before. All this is carved into a soft hard rock. This type of strange shaped chambers carved within the rock are a very common sight in that area of Turkey, inside these megalithic ancient complexes. And besides being huge, other interesting thing about them is that these holes on the top, usually they would always have a diameter of 90 centimeters, and also on the sides of these chambers, one can see something that looks like traces of some sort of huge tool that was kind of drilling the rock. I mean, we don't have uh, technology nowadays that could do uh, something on such a scale, something similar. Those small triangular cuttings within the stone are very typical for this area and these structures. Nobody knows really what they were for. The historians assure us that people in ancient times were breeding pigeons. Well, it's kind of a guess made because there are pigeons really living in this cave. However, they never nest or they don't even land in these small holes for the simple reason that you cannot fit the pigeon inside. So the version about being pigeon nests really doesn't meet the real reality as it is seen on the ground. On this particular photo, the traces of supposedly this huge ancient tool that was carving the rock are very clear. This is another interesting huge piece of rock on the right side. We can see some remains of an ancient stone structure carved into the solid rock. But as the layers of the earth moved, apparently over millions of years, this even it actually turned on an angle. It's no longer even standing on on its bottom. You can just have start getting some perspective about how old this could be. That even the upper layer of the earth moved since those times.